What is a firefighter? A firefighter is a lonely man holding a mid-morning watch with book in hand and a telephone within a split second's reach. A darkened apparatus floor, a complicated alarm system, now silent, but perhaps within the next blink of an eye or turn of a page will scream out with the clanging of bells, the turning of gears, and the ticking of tape. What is a firefighter? He is years of constant training that must guide him in every move once that great silver bell again must exact awake ye from your beds. Your heavy resting hearts within the sigh of an awakening must now beat with the strength of an athlete, a fighter, for a fighter you are. A firefighter is a man responsible for thousands of dollars of equipment, and for the lives of his fellow men he knows he must protect. He is a man constantly studying for promotions, not content that as a private he already represents leadership in the community. For a young girl or boy there is no doubt who he is. Yes, he was the one who found time to smile down at them. From the top of his protective helmet to the bottoms of his steel-reinforced boots he appeared to be a giant. "Get back," he shouted, as he strained to move hundreds of pounds of water-filled hose only to disappear into a hell of smoke and heat. Are you worried about your smoking habits? The firefighter must now inhale the truly king size of them all, 3 stories high and filled with foreign and domestic sofas, carpets, paints, and woods. The tolls are great among these men, greater than almost every other occupation. The rewards, long hours, working weekends and holidays. He gives up time with his own family for the sake and safeguard of those who see only the superficial man and not the superman that perhaps he is. For this he is, if only in the heart and mind of a child not blinded by the isms of life, but instead opened by a tear as his floppy-eared puppy responds to the carefully applied artificial respiration given to it by a combination doctor, firefighter, truck driver and yes, maybe a superman. Perhaps that tear is the firefighter's reward. Someday he too may shed a tear for a fallen comrade, silently praying that his own last alarm will herald the end to a glorious career through retirement, and not through death or injury. What is a firefighter? Ask the people that he has helped in times of fire, flood, plane, car and boat disasters, accidents through carelessness or in times of war. When others walk away, the firefighter must now take on the responsibilities of saving lives and property. A giant, a superman, a constant vigil for the prevention of fire. Oh, to have the eyes and faith of a child. If only grown-ups were so blessed, the firefighter's life would be the richest on earth. Copyright 1968, James Taylor. The following is based on a true event in 1970. The Secret Life of Tommy Westwind by James Taylor. Molly Potter, a septuagenarian black woman, sat on the cast iron grate that jutted out from the stone wall of the firehouse. She wore an old dress that she or some other young girl, many years ago, had partied in when good times held promises and promises meant good times. Molly was watching the firemen cutting and raking the grass as they did every Wednesday. She was drunk, as she was on every Wednesday, and her hand slowly pulled her wig down over her wrinkled brow and held it against her face. Twisting and turning the synthetic apparel, she slowly returned it so that it rested backwards upon her head as an ignoble crown. Lieutenant Tommy Westwind was embarrassed as he watched her. The cutters and rakers were white, he and Molly were black. Tommy Westwind took pride in his Indian ancestry. Nobody seemed to take him seriously when he talked of his ancient forebears being hornswoggled out of their lands north of the capital city. Tommy, through past intermarriages, had evolved into an American black, yet his heart belonged to the Great Spirit that he prayed to. Baptists, with their gospel shouting, bothered him. Foreign blacks that he referred to as goat-eaters bothered him. The black firemen's group that was always into politics and never found time to help the children, bothered him, and Molly Potter, who was slowly exposing herself, as she sat in a very unladylike manner, bothered him. The other firemen began to make crude remarks and joke with Molly. Maybe she would place her wig over her face again, maybe she would drink some more and pass out. Maybe, just maybe, they could coax her into further embarrassing Lieutenant Westwind. Molly Potter was beyond embarrassment, but Tommy Westwind began to react, and the others seemed satisfied. "Get out of here, you old douchebag!" he shouted. He began to feel less black, less Indian, and less human. "God damn!" he said to himself, "God damn it!" At times like this, Tommy Westwind wished that he could be with his relatives on the reservation in Upper New York, where the older people, like Molly, could live out their remaining years with respect and return to Mother Earth. The city held no such hope, nor could Molly or Tommy ever find sanctuary beneath the concrete and asphalt that so boldly and callously separated man's spirit from the bosom of the earth. Molly now seemed to be settled for the day, so Tommy, in a reluctant manner, ordered his men to finish up and get back into the firehouse. Molly slowly got up as the last raker filed into the cavernous stone building and locked the door behind him, just as Lieutenant Westwind had ordered. Molly, in her party dress and wearing her ignoble crown, got up and walked around to the front door and tried the doorknob and said that she wanted to use the bathroom. "I ain't getting your crabs," bellowed the man on watch and pulled down the shades so that Molly couldn't look in. Several hours later, when the shift had ended, Lieutenant Westwind got into his car, drove to the bulkily packaged store, and purchased a bottle of vodka. He then drove to a single-family home that had stood for 100 years. Ringing the doorbell twice, he proceeded through the old oak door. After all, old amigos were always welcome. "Tommy!" shouted Molly. She was almost sober now and her hair was on straight. "How come you're always locking me out?" Tommy didn't answer. He had taken a couple of glasses from the cabinet and started to pour the colorless liquid. "You know, at one time my ancestors owned half of this land. They were Blackfoot Indians," Tommy boasted. "Oh, go on, you're nothing but a jive ass," choked Molly as the elixir reached her stomach. As the evening wore on, Molly's imagination soared to interplanetary heights, as Tommy weaved tales of dauntless braves and of his valorous Indian heritage. She believed him to be an illustrious chief. Tommy watched as she applied some lipstick and fixed her hair. He envisioned his companion in her party dress, mellowed and obscured by the alcohol. The garment lost its wrinkles and stains of soot from the city. For a brief time in their lonely lives, until the firewater ran out, the Great Spirit would smile down on them and their cosmic spirits would find peace in the venerable brotherhood of man. Survival at Sunrise by James Taylor, a true event. On June 28, 1982. Fire in a large apartment building with a collapse that sends several members to the hospital. It was during the early morning hours, and the rain was dancing in swirl patterns along the desolate street in front of the firehouse. We waited. Off in the distance a reddish glow, reminiscent of a sunset, pulsated. We waited, and we knew that this pulsating glow was feeding like a parasite on a building that had housed 12 families. Radio reports on this fire had been dispatched to our station over the past hour. Now came a third, a 3-3, alarm for 19 Belden Street. In rapid succession the second and third alarms were sounded, and our waiting was ended. Within minutes we were responding. The sound of our siren cut through the damp, misty air. The smell of wet city streets took on the odor of damp ashes, and the swirled rain patterns were lost in a musty fog that reeked of smoke as we approached the fire area. As we pulled our apparatus into the scene area, we became mechanical. Orders were given, and orders were changed. We were told to go in this directions and that direction. We didn't give it a second thought, and soon the fire was out. I found myself standing next to a dumpster in an earthen parking lot. To my left, stood the fire-ravaged structure with its blackened window frames, like hollow eyes staring down at us. In back of me, adjacent to the hollow-eyed giant, stood a one-story building. Men were being sent to the roof to direct hose streams into its fire-damaged neighbor. The sun had risen and we were endowed with daylight. No, it was pitch black, and I was moving deeper into the blackness. All existence was in my mind. I was floating into opacity and a gigantic red ball followed me. I heard muffled cries for help and the sounds of closing doors behind me. One by one they closed and I thought and wondered about what was going to open ahead of me. I began to realize that these sounds were not of closing doors but walls crashing to the ground. I was on a carpet of air moving ahead, one step ahead of the falling bricks. I began to pray. I landed on my hands and knees and waited to be struck. My vision was still in blackness and I thought that I was covered with blood and began to reach for my extremities to make sure my body was still intact. The sensation of blood was only the wetness of the muddy water and I felt a cold calmness. I slowly dragged myself to an abandoned car and rested against it. Someone began to push me back towards a one-story building ablaze. I was numb from shock. I couldn't move. The blast, due to a spontaneous backdraft of heated gases within the one-story building, had blown me about 30 feet from the location of the dumpster to the point where I landed. Slowly I came back to the consciousness of the real world. My portable radio was gone and soreness raked my body. Several firefighters had been standing on the roof of the one-story building when it was destroyed by the explosion and rushed to the hospital. Many times after a close call, I heard firefighters talk of retirement, including myself, only to wait another year for one more raise, one more benefit. Yet in a strange way, it felt good to have survived and I felt that I could go on forever. It felt good until after I returned to the firehouse I was reprimanded for losing my portable radio. You can see actual photos of what I have described below. Copyright 1984 by retired Fire Captain James Taylor.